Pikmin 3 and Splinter Cell Blacklist. Two games that, on the surface, have very little in common. One is a colourful real-time strategy game about aliens and fruit. The other is a tactical action stealth game about terrorism and leadership. But they do both share something that's become extremely important to the reception of big titles in recent years. Things were expected of them. Both are entries in series that started in the early 2000s, whose first game defined a console, the GameCube and the Xbox respectively. Where Pikmin hasn't been seen since 2004, Splinter Cell is on its sixth go-around, with Blacklist completing a very muddled second trilogy. We'll get this out of the way now. We enjoyed both, but playing them has got us thinking, what is it fair to expect from a game? You see, going into Blacklist, our expectations were low. Not dirt low, we knew it would at least be a solid game, but we can't say we expected it to challenge for the title of best game in the series. That it does, and maybe even claims it, is a welcome surprise. The game is a consolidation of the mechanics, styles and tones of the previous 5 titles, offering flexible and dynamic approaches to its time-tested stealth gameplay. It succeeds, most of all, because it brings back elements that had been abandoned, an emphasis on shadows and goggles and gadgets we've enjoyed since the very first installment. And yet, when it comes to Pikmin 3, we can't help but feel a little disappointed that the game is so much like the previous 2. Sure, it adds new characters and some new Pikmin, but the core gameplay is just as it always was. You land on the surface, harvest an army of little plant people, direct them around, bop bigger creatures to death, find fruit and drag anything that isn't rooted in the ground back home to be lasered into more Pikmin. We think the new survival focus, where you only have as many days to play as you have reserves of juice, is excellent, but the experience is so similar to what's been before. Why, in this case, did we expect more than that? Why is it we can hold Pikmin 3 to task for not evolving the series, when at the same time we'll praise Blacklist for going back on itself? Well, for starters, there is that massive 9-year wait. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, fosters nostalgia, and just fuels the imagination. Waiting for Pikmin 3, we've solidified 1 and 2 in our brains as classics, and many times imagined where the series could go with better hardware to support it. Linked to this, Pikmin, unlike Splinter Cell, has a short history, and no examples of an installment that went wrong. All it has in the books are 2 previously great games so unique that it's hard to even compare them to each other, let alone with others. Blacklist, meanwhile, doesn't just have 5 predecessors to go up against, it has a long, rich history of stealth games, third-person action games, and shooters you can compare it to. Where, for some, this makes the game more worn and predictable, we think it gives it a context to impress in. We also need to consider the sorts of games these are. Pikmin is a strategy game, so technical snags like poor pathfinding really stand out, especially when developers Nintendo have had so long to think about and fix the problem. Blacklist, however, is an action game, and although it has its own share of technical issues, these never really hamper the thrill of sneaking about, knocking people on the head, and watching through walls with your sonar goggles. Had the last Splinter Cell game been 9 years ago and amazing, and the last Pikmin game been 3 years ago and a bit of a letdown, maybe our reaction to these 2 installments would have been different. Whichever game you prefer, try asking yourself, what were you expecting?